Hey everybody, it's Rick here. Welcome back to my bedroom. Today we're going to jump into Fusion 360 and learn how to create a setup in the manufacturer workspace. It's always the first step you take before you create your toolpaths. All right, well, let's jump into the computer then. Today we're going to learn how to set up your project in the manufacturer workspace so you can program your toolpaths and cut your project on a CNC router, or in our case, our shopbot. I'll show you how to do 4 things. Switch to the manufacturer workspace, create an initial CAM setup, modify the work coordinate system within Fusion to match the orientation of the CNC, and lastly, ensure that your setup is programmed correctly. All right, let's switch from the design workspace to the manufacturer workspace. Move your mouse to the top left of your screen and click where it says Design. Now move down and select Manufacturer. If you have an older version of Fusion 360, then it might read CAM instead. Don't worry, Manufacturer and CAM are the same thing. Now that we're in the Manufacturer workspace, we're going to start up here in the top left by clicking the Setup button. This is always your first step when designing your toolpaths. Let's take a look at the setup screen here. We have a short list of properties to change. The first thing we want to ensure is that the operation type is set to milling when using a CNC router or shopbot. The next thing we want to do is ensure that our work coordinate system is set up in the proper orientation as it relates to our CNC router. I want to take a moment to explain the work coordinate system and why it's important to set it up correctly. Imagine a CNC router as if it were laid out on graph paper. In one direction we have an x-axis, and in the perpendicular direction we have the y-axis. Taken together, we have the x and y plane. The bed of our shopbot, or any CNC router, exists within this plane. Perpendicular from the x and y plane is the direction of the sky. This is the z-axis. We need to ensure that the x, y, and z positive directions within Fusion 360 match the actual positive directions of our CNC machine. So let's go ahead and do that by changing the orientation from model orientation to select z-axis / plane and x-axis. The first thing we want to do is select an edge of our model that corresponds to the z-axis of our CNC router. It could be any one of these features you see here. Then we'll have to find our x-axis. In this case, I'll click the long side of the plywood sketch we drew in the previous video. We're going to need to make sure that the arrowhead on the red axis line is pointing to the right so that it will encompass our entire project. To do that, click Flip X-axis. Now we need to set up our X, Y, and Z origin, or starting point. To do that, change Origin to Model Box Point. Then we need to choose the bottom point such that the entire project is encompassed by X, Y, and Z positive. The arrowheads in Fusion denote positive direction. We want to ensure that Fusion knows which models to include in our setup. Click Model and choose the bodies you are intending to cut in this project. So now we need to set up our stock. Click on the Stock tab and change the mode from Fixed Size Box to Relative Size Box. When we look at the Dimensions section, we should see how big a piece of stock material we'll need to cut our project. Let's delete the default stock side and stock top offsets. When we check our dimensions again, the Z height field should read the exact thickness of plywood that we measured with our calipers. If it doesn't, you'll need to go back to the design workspace and update your parameters or extrude features so that the thickness of your bodies equal the thickness of the plywood. It's also possible that your bodies aren't in the same plane, so you may need to realign them as well. Okay, so now that we're done, let's click OK, and now give the setup a meaningful name by double-clicking on the setup icon in the browser and renaming it. All right, good job creating your first CAM setup in Fusion 360. In the next video, we'll learn how to design two-dimensional toolpaths, the first of which will be 2D contour cutting. See you there!